Welcome to the Deal by Me podcast. This is where we ask guests to tell us your story. Story can be encouraging, inspiring, and very transforming. We want guests to share their experiences and events in their lives that can benefit someone else. We all have a story. If you have one and interested in sharing the experiences and events in your life, contact us on our website, dealbyme.com, and let us know that you're willing to share your story. We ask you to give us a comment and to share our podcast with others. And if you're viewing this on YouTube, will you please give us a comment and consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Today, we are grateful and very thrilled to have with us Dr. B. Angelo Burch Sr., who is very familiar here in the Durham community. He's currently the CEO of the African American Community Collaborative, Inc., and he is Executive Director of the African American Dance Ensemble. He is very accomplished and will have quite a bit to say to us today. It is a thrill, and I'm so very excited to have him share with us in our podcast. Dr. Burch, would you just tell our listeners a little bit about your background, where you were born, maybe how many is in your family, just a little bit so that listeners will know exactly who you are and can relate to our conversation this morning.
It's Dr. Smith. I guess I'm the most boringest guest you're going to have during this entire series. I was born in Durham, raised in Elizabeth City and Wilmington. My mom was a pastor, and she actually started a church in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, where she stayed for 2 years. And then she was moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, where she pastored for 8 years. So my formative years was between those two cities. She was moved back to Durham in 1974. And then I came back, when we moved back here, stayed here, went to school here. Mom had a stroke when I was 10 years old. And so she went into the hospital, didn't see her for 3 years. By the time she came back out, she was totally paralyzed.
Yeah.
At that age, I was probably a little shy of being really 13 years old, but I actually quit school at that time to take care of her and my baby sister, who was autistic. And it was an interesting time. I learned how to cook, learned how to take care of house. I tell folk there are certain things you don't ever want to see, and when you're taking care of your mom and you have to bathe her, that's a whole different world. But God being good, as I grew older, mom got better. The doctor said she would never be able to live on her own, but before she passed, she was in her own apartment. She had fought back. She never was able to pastor again. I had 9 of us. 2 of my older brothers were killed when I was young. One was shot in Wilmington to death, trying to help a young lady who was being beaten by her boyfriend, and another brother who was stabbed to death by a girl who wanted to date him. So those tragedies kind of led to understanding that life is fleeting, life is short. And so, you know, I recall those times, and I miss those. I miss my brothers. And the time that I did have when I was young with them, I ended up going into the Army, and didn't want to really go to the Army. I think I was thought God maybe wasn't in the Army. I was called to preach when I was 7 years old.
Mhm.
Um, by the time I got into my teen years, my later teen years, I had decided to get back to school. And when I could, we had someone that could come home and stay with my mom and stay with my sister so I could go back to school, which kind of made me want my education even more and made me thrive to make sure I was educated because I didn't want to just be out on the corner seeing things that I had, or being one of those people that I saw when we grew up in the projects. Um, when I left the military and came back to Durham, um, things just kind of moved slowly. You know, I pastored my first church at the age of 19. Uh,
Wow.
that was right. That was right out of the military. Um, I pastored my first church and enjoyed it. Learned a lot about the church, and at that time it was a Pentecostal denomination, so we were appointed to the churches. We weren't where a bishop appointed us, so we didn't have to apply for it. If they wanted you to go somewhere, they sent you. Um, so those you know, without getting into detail.
Oh yeah, well,
Go ahead.
I do appreciate you sharing that. You'd be surprised at listeners who would love to hear the little background of the guests on the show because they can somewhat identify with it. You'd be surprised at the number of folk who have large families and who've had tragedies in their lives, and to just hear somebody else talk about it, uh, gives them a sense of encouragement. It inspires them. So, what you reason I, and that's the reason I asked that question and allow you the opportunity to do that because I know that you're not the only one who
Yeah.
has had those kind of situations in their lives, and many people can attest to it. And so I want to thank you for doing that. Uh, I know also that you have uh, uh, you are a very accomplished individual, one that I admire with all the things that you have done. And so I want to just ask you, with all of your accomplishments, and including certificates, diplomas, and degrees, what made you decide to seek or accept the position of president of the Durham branch of the NAACP? And we know what the NAACP is all about, and this is a real honor uh, as I see it. And so, you had so much going for you. So what caused you to uh, decide to seek or accept the position?
Dr. Smith, basically, the question, I'm going to narrow it down because I know we don't
Okay.
have all day, but it was because of my past.
Okay.
You know, um, I tell folk that out of tragedy, you either succumb to it or you use it as a stepping stone.
Oh. Hmm.
Um, you have to make that choice. And this is going to sound convoluted, but I preached my mother's husband's funeral, and one of the things I said was he taught me how to be a father by not being one. All of that kind of guided me to being with the NAACP because we advocate for people. We speak for those that can't speak for themselves. I lived a life to where, you know, I was telling my son I graduated alone. everything I did, I stood on the stage by myself. You know, my mom wasn't able to be there for me because of her illness. So a lot of the things that God allowed me to do, there was no one to advocate. And out of the pain of even in the church, when I ran into situations, you know, Dr. King once said, it's not the words of our enemies that we'll remember, but the silence of our friends.
Hmm.
And I want to make sure that no one has to feel the pain when they're trying to deal with situations in life that I had to deal with. I told one of our preachers, a good friend, I'm not going to call his name, but I told him a couple of months ago, I feel like Paul sometimes, you know. um, I finished my course.
Mm-hmm.
I've kept the faith. And in being the president of the NAACP, it allows me to use the pain of my yesterdays, the tragedies of my past, to understand what people are going through today, and to understand that everything doesn't have to be a fight. We can talk some things through. We, with the NAACP, we can advocate on the behalf of those that can't formalize those words, that can't formalize their pain, that can't sit there and just say, hey, look, this is what's killing me. I need someone else to talk for me. And so being president of the NAACP gives me that ability to do for others what no one ever did for me.
I love that. I love it. That's very admirable. I know the listeners of this podcast would be very interested in knowing uh, what some of the goals and things you would like to accomplish as president of the local branch of the NAACP. Could you talk about that a little bit for us? If and you may not have actually had a chance to develop all of that, but as much as you can you share some of that with listeners of this podcast?
I would love to see the NAACP in Durham take the stage once again, to be relevant, uh, that people will understand that when something happens in Durham, we are there, and we're not working in silos. One of the goals and one of the things that we have accomplished already is that we work now with the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People. With the chairman, I speak with him, and I want to see us grow and be relevant in these times. Our people are hurting, Dr. Smith. That they're going through situations, and I want the NAACP to not just be the whip that somebody brings out to hit someone with. I want to be partners with our communities, with our churches. I want our churches and our pastors to understand that we're there because we have worked so long in silos that we haven't accomplished much. So my goal is to see the NAACP grow, to see us again, and I'm repeating myself, to be relevant, to be better today and tomorrow than we were yesterday, and not complain about the past, but to move on and help our community.
I I am really thrilled just listening to you because I do know that the Durham community needs somebody who is forward looking, who can understand the pain of the less fortunate, and who also, um, have that kind of background and listen to you share about what you went through doing your family, the tragedy. All of that can make one see life different. You know, yeah, and I can attest to that so well because of even my own background and what I've gone through. You know, at one time I would never have thought about doing what I'm doing now, trying to encourage and inspire and transform folks. Uh, but because of what I've gone through, it has made it more relevant to me. So I do understand exactly where you're coming from, and I do appreciate that. Tell me, uh, did you give any thoughts, any serious thoughts uh, to what it entails being the president of the Durham branch of the NAACP?
I gave a lot of thought to it.
Okay.
It was about like when I ran for state office. I called my children and talked to them and got their opinion on it because I knew it was going to be somewhat high profile. Your face is going to be out there. I'm not one of those people that seek the camera. And so even in thinking about the NAACP, and I have to do this, Dr. Smith, to answer this question. When I lost my kidneys and pretty much lost everything I owned, lost my job, lost my house, lost my cars.
I understand.
I walked to dialysis 5 miles one way. I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I walked to dialysis. I got on dialysis for 3.5 hours and then I got off and I walked back home. I fought to stay alive. When I was taken off when things would happen at the transplant center, I questioned what was going on at the facilities. I questioned what was going on at the hospital. And I questioned so much that the powers that be decided that I was what they call non-compliant and I was taken off the transplant list. I ended up going to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore and told them what had happened. And within being 3 months listed, I received my kidneys, and that was a kidney transplant. That was back in 20, I want to say, what was it? 09. Yeah, that was back in 09. And I've had my kidneys. I haven't had any problems since. I say all that to say this, that when I thought about being the president of the NAACP, I remembered the pain of having to fight for my life. And then fighting people that were more powerful than I was, more powerful than me. I remember those mornings of walking to dialysis. I remember those mornings of walking after dialysis. And so taking that position said to me, this gives me an opportunity to fight for those people that are going through the same thing I went through. And I can stand up and say, hey, look, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. This is not how it's going to be. And advocate for those that cannot advocate for themselves. And so deciding to be president of the NAACP was an easy decision to make because now it gives a national voice to local pains.
Oh, I love it. I love it. This is just awesome. Let me say this to you and ask you a question. There are a lot of folk who are listening to this podcast. And I know when I decided to retire from the church 2 months short of 32 years, one of the things I wanted to do was to start a podcast that I thought would help encourage, inspire, and hopefully transform some lives. Just listening to your story and just listening to what you have gone through. And gee, I've read your bio. I know your accomplishments. What would you say to folks who have not maybe accomplished or have not been able to reach the goals that they have set for themselves, is there anything that you can say to them that will give them some encouragement, maybe inspire them, that they can kind of get out of the ditch that they're in and begin to move forward?
I would say, Dr. Smith, don't give up.
Okay.
You know, the situation comes, but we determine which way we're going to move in that situation. I always look at it as being on a road. There are two directions. You know, what was the poem, "The Road Not Traveled"? You know, or so I can go to the left. I can pity myself. I can talk about and wallow in the mud, or I can get up, as Dr. King say, stand up, and because a man can't ride your back unless it's bent.
Hmm.
And so you stand up and you move forward. And it's kind of like when you're running a race, when you're running track, you see the hurdles before you. You have a choice. You either jump the hurdles or you walk around them. God gave me the strength to jump the hurdles. And every hurdle got higher, but I could look back and look and see what God had brought me through. Does the pain still exist? Yes. But rather than to use it and then go to drugs or alcohol and say, hey, look, I'm going to wallow in it. No, 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 no. I serve a God that's greater than my pains.
Hmm.
And I serve a God that's greater than my trials. And I look at it in this way, that for anyone that's going through anything, it's only a test. It sounds like a familiar phrase, but it really is. It's just a test. Um, and it's not so much for me as it is for the people that I will encounter in life. Nothing I've been through, no tears I've shed, no moments of my being or feeling invisible or feeling unwanted was so much for me as it was for the people that God would allow me to meet in my lifetime. And I think about Paul. You know, Paul says, and I know this is a long answer, but Paul says, you know, he looks back on his, when you study Paul and you see where he was, how he was isolated from even the other apostles. Paul was one that was not well accepted by the other disciples or the other apostles. He was always fighting. He was always fighting to be relevant. But yet, when we read our Bible, that guy that fought to be relevant has more books in that Bible than anybody else. And his message to all of us was, the time of my departure is at hand, but I fought a good fight.
What can
And
you say?
that's the one thing I want to tell people. Be able that when that time comes, you can say, hey, look, I fought a good fight.
I fought a good fight. Oh, wow. Listeners, listeners don't go to place, because Dr. Burch is going to share some more good information with us. But let me first ask Dr. Burch, if someone is listening to this podcast and be interested in obtaining a membership in the NAACP, how would he or she go about doing it?
They can call 919-672-1058, or they can go online and join the NAACP. And down in the bottom right, it asks what unit, and you just put Durham, and they will know that it's for the Durham branch. But they can do that online, and they can pay their money online. If they decide to call me, then I will get them with the secretary of the NAACP and make sure that if because everyone doesn't like to do things online. I understand that. So we need to mail them an application. We will get their address and mail them the application so they can fill it out, send it back to us, send a check or money order, and we'll get things rolling.
Oh, that's good. Good information, and I know that listeners are excited to know how they can go about obtaining a membership. And even your host, I looked at his card, and he has to upgrade his, so which means he's going to be getting a membership. I knew I had joined, but I didn't know how long it had been ago. I said, let me check this because I got the president of the NAACP coming on, so I want to make sure that I know where I am. So great to hear from you. Now let me ask you this: if you know, you have your story is just fantastic. So if somebody just wanted to, you know, chat with you, talk with you, not necessarily about the NAACP, is there a website or email or something that you would be willing to share with listeners so that they could, you know, say, Dr. Burch, I'm going through this, and I know I heard your story. Can I just talk to you for a moment? Is that something that you do, or you prefer not to do it? And
No,
I don't.
sir. I think, Dr. Smith, you know, we have to make ourselves available, because not having someone to talk to
Mhm.
is is a bad thing. But yeah, the number I gave, the 919-672-1058, that's my personal cell. I will answer if I'm not in a meeting. But for my email, it would be director at aade-inc.org, and that is my work email, and I do respond. But I'm always there, and I want to be there for folk because people are hurting, and it's not just about going out and doing a march. It's not about going out and doing a riot. God knows we don't want any riots, but if we can't sit down and help folk get through the pains of their todays, then we'll be burying them tomorrow.
Well said. Well said. Now, let me say this to you. You know, I know you are not only president of the Durham branch of the NAACP, but you are also involved in a leader in many other nonprofits with the community. So, talk about some of the other organizations and corporations that you're involved in. I know I've read your bios, but you know, listeners will want to know some of the other things that you're doing.
Well, I am the Grand Director, which is the State Director for North Carolina for Prince Hall Masons, for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, for special projects. And what we do is that we partner with organizations that folk wouldn't think we would partner with. We actually did a Stand for Durham. We've done 2 Stand for Durhams where we fight against violence using the Prince Hall Masons, our Grand Master, the Honorable D.T. Thompson, who appointed me this position. And so working with the Masons has been a great thing because it gives us an opportunity to get back into the community, to give back to the community. I think many people may know or have heard of Chuck Davis. Chuck was the founder of the African American Dance Ensemble. And we're 35 years old, 38, excuse me, 38 years old now. I changed the name to the African American Community Collaborative because I felt we could do more under that umbrella and still keep the African American Dance Ensemble to where we use the arts to teach culture, and in the day and time of which we're in, to where so many are trying to deny our community what we have been through in our history. We can use the arts to teach culture. We can use the arts to help our youth to understand. As Chuck Davis used to say, if we're dancing together, we don't have time to fight one another. And so using that through the dance, and then we have the African American COVID Task Force, which we handle the healthcare piece. So when the COVID pandemic came, the vaccines were not coming to our community. They were going everywhere else, but they weren't coming to our community. What we did was we began to work together, and we formed the African American COVID Task Force, and we bought the vaccines to our community. The first one we had was at Mount Vernon Missionary Baptist Church. And we opened the portal, Dr. Smith, that Friday night. I'll never forget it. we got 250 vaccines,
Hmm.
but now we had to get the people to come. So we spent Friday night, Saturday, and didn't go to church Sunday, registering people to come get their vaccines.
Hmm.
And we did that in one weekend. And that next week, we were ready to put vaccines in the arms of our community. And so now we're dealing with Mpox. And so we've petitioned for a grant to get our community vaccinated. And so that's some of the things that we do with those companies or those avenues that I work with. Those
Okay.
so
Yeah.
it's just trying to make sure that our
I,
people get what we need.
I got you. I got you. With all that you're doing, how do you juggle all of this and be able to still be successful with it all? Because you are definitely doing quite a bit. I think about when I was pastoring, you know, juggling everything. So how do you do it? Because people, they want to know. Say, this gentleman is doing so much. How's he juggling all of this? There must be something within you that makes you do that.
My love for my community,
Hmm. What's
you
that?
know, um, you do. Who was it that said we do what we must?
Mm,
We do what we have to do. Um, no one forced any of this on me, so I can't complain.
hmm.
I do it because I want to make sure that my people get the best care and attention that they can get. And so, yeah, I have more days behind me than I have ahead of me. But when I do leave this world, I want to be able to say that I gave all for my community. And so when they do eat chicken over me and after me, they'll enjoy the meal and they'll enjoy what I've done and what God has allowed in my life.
Dr. Burch, you have uh, been so inspirational today, even to me as host, because you have made it known not only to me, but I know to listeners of this podcast that ministering is not always about pastoring, that you can do ministry in so many other ways. And with what you're saying and what you are doing and have done is certainly ministry. And I want to really commend you for that. It is just awesome that you are doing this. And I want to say thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith.
Thank you. And there you have it. D. Angelo Burch.
B.
Who, B. I'm sorry.
D'Angelo is the singer. B. Angelo is the preacher.
All right, I got you. B. Angelo. Burch, Senior, we're grateful to have him share with us today, who is a father of four, grandfather of three, and he is a fourth generation preacher. And in the 3 decades of ministry, he serves as pastor in 3 denominations and district prelate. I'm just excited to have Dr. Burch share with us today.